left unsaid. Days that can't be counted by the time till rent. Tomorrow's just another like the one that comes next. The corner of the highway that leads to the job at the desk by the boss with the elegant watch. The tick of the clock and the tick of the clock mark the moments till the ticking stops.
I am so excited for today's podcast with Lewis Henry Mitchell, who directs and oversees all aspects of character art for Sesame Workshop, the nonprofit organization behind Sesame Street. From designing the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade balloons and floats to directing Sesame Street Muppet photo shoots, Lewis has been a full-time member of Sesame Workshop since the year 2000. He also has a new book, Qreative Evolution, the intimate practice of creative fulfillment through guided self-education. Enjoy the pod. Lewis Henry Mitchell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Hey, before we start, I have a friend who wants to say hi.
There's my boy. Now I'm home. That's it.
Yeah.
You did it.
So we'll be right here next to us in case we need. Actually, our mutual friend, Ed Wells, who was my boss, who came to us from Sesame. This is in his office, and he asked if I wanted to borrow it for the interview, and I said, absolutely.
How about that? It's still in his heart. It's still in his heart.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, and this is the thing that's so interesting. And I think it's the reason he wanted us to talk, which is it is very rare for a human like you and I to work for a single creative organization for like 25 years, or in my case, it'll be 38 come October. I started here in 88. And the thing when I was reading the book, I was like, oh, we are so aligned because this is a mess. I just wrote a piece for Forbes. It's this Business Development Council piece that I wrote for them, which is about the fact that creativity is not magic. And people often want to make it seem like it's magic because it makes them magic. But in fact, it is a practice. It involves the discovery and all these things. And I think this is a POV that you and I share, right?
Absolutely. And actually, everyone's an artist. That's the premise of the whole book, is that everyone's an artist because you're creating your life. With every moment, a lot of people don't realize that, but every moment is like a squeeze of paint or a stroke of a brush. You are actually, or a sculpt or writing. It's all part of living every day. So why not do that intentionally? Why not live as if you are creating a life because you are? But if you're doing it with intention, then you can actually impact the outcome of what's going on. And I do want to say one thing about the title. Yes, it's Qreative Evolution, but the subtitle actually was adjusted. It's how to find your creative fulfillment through questioning everything.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it was elevated by the publisher, actually, because they said we want to be able to tie it back into why is there a Q in there instead of a C? That's because I want to question everything. And they wanted
great.
Yeah, so that's...
Well, and that's hard. And that's harder, right? I mean, that's the thing about that. And then this is the book that's about that. This isn't an easy pursuit. This involves roadblocks.
Exactly. But the thing about it is that when we were kids, we knew we were doing this. And that's why play is very important. But play is the business of children. So that's how they operate. That's how they do everything. So we're not supposed to really lose that. And of course, as we grow up, we become adults. But adulting is what we do. It's not who we are. That child is supposed to always be there so that you can be creative as you pursue your life. And we're supposed to be playing, playful. Just right now we're playing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's serious business. But at the same time, we're going to have a good time. And we're going to be able to reach into our hearts for the content. That's what the substance is.
My wife, Anne, has a book coming out next month called Funnier. So she runs the first ever BA in comedy writing and performance here at Columbia College. So she's a tenured comedy professor. But the title is based on dads or moms who at the open house would come and say, hey, are you going to make my kid funny? And she goes, I can't make them funny, but I can make them funnier. I can take the thing they have. And this is what you're saying, which is like, no, it's there. It's just a matter of, and here's the other thing I think is true. And I know you'll agree, which is like, it's not that they can't be incredibly funny. It's whether they're going to allow themselves, whether others are going to allow them to, who are you surrounded with? What is someone saying in your ear? What are you saying to yourself? And these are things that they're hard because just like absence of play as we get older, people don't think you should be self-talking. They think somehow you should have it figured out. And I think you and I are here to tell you it doesn't get figured out.
No, nobody can figure anything out, right? We're not that smart,
No.
but we can influence it. We can definitely influence it. Yeah, but I
Let,
mean, why just stick to what people tell us to do as adults? You know, another premise of the book is that we live our lives internally before we live them externally. So our
right.
thought life, the way we live in our minds, is really the first place we live. So why not influence that by feeding it the kind of things that are going to give us the confidence to be able to live outside like that? So of course, people, your environment, of course, is going to influence you, but that inner environment is also more important, because wherever I go, I feel like I'm at home. And I travel all over the world. I still
Yeah.
feel at home because of my inner environment. I really protect that, and I nurture it, and I cultivate it constantly.
Can we talk about your childhood and how you grew up? And because I think that's instrumental in who you became. So you grew up in Brooklyn, and you instantly had a love of art and drawing and comic books and Sesame Street, right? You grew up with that.
Did I grow up? Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, sort of.
sort of.
Yeah, well, and I was about 9 years old when Sesame Street first started, but I was in love with Muppets. So when I saw the
Yeah.
puppets on that show, I said, those kind of look like the puppets I saw on the Ed Sullivan Show. And sure enough, it was Jim Henson. So he was like my first real hero.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, you know, my mom would just surround me whenever she saw me interested in things. She would just kind of leave it around for me. She wouldn't directly, like I started learning how to play the piano. And, you know, we didn't have a piano at home, but eventually she was able to find one. But then she saw me trying to learn like Scott Joplin pieces of music and things like that, complicated pieces of music, but I was really learning it. So one day I come home from school, and I was a nosy kid. She knew that. So she bought me a box set of Scott Joplin ragtime music and just left it in the record collection. And then one day I'm looking around, hey, Mom, we have Scott. Did you know? Yeah, I knew to find it eventually. She was a she paid attention, but she never made a big deal of it. So that way she wouldn't overwhelm me, because she saw me moving. Like one day I was learning how to draw animals from newspapers and magazines. And then one day I come home from school and I see these boxes underneath one of the lamp tables in the living room. And being the nosy kid I am, and she knew I was, so I went and I opened it up without asking. I just had to find out what it was. It was a whole 4-volume encyclopedia of animals. Mom, did you know we had? Yeah, I knew you'd find it eventually. That's how she did it. She just stayed back and let me discover. Our lives is about discovery, not about decisions. Because again, we can't figure this life out. We can only follow our hearts and then walk that path. Try the things that we're being called to in a way. I know it sounds like a big heavy thing. No, being called, I call it creative gravity. Your heart's pulling you in a certain direction, and you're finding these things. As a kid, you're really susceptible to that. But as we grow up, I don't think we lose it. We just kind of cover it over with
That's right.
adulting, you know.
That's right. I was not a comic book kid, but there was a comic book store in the neighborhood that I live in and that my kids grew up in, and I remember going into the shop with my son, and him discovering Green Lantern was everything. Like that became the other day I saw a picture of him and I at Wrigley Field for a Paul McCartney concert, and he's wearing his Green Lantern t-shirt. I'm like, okay,
Wow.
like 10 or so. So I want you to, people might not know who Neil Adams is, and this is a very important figure for you and someone you ended up working with. Can you tell us who he is and your relationship?
Sure. Neil Adams, to me, still to this day, the greatest comic book artist, arguably, although you couldn't argue with him about that, but arguably the greatest comic book artist of all time. He pushed it to another level. And, just as a kid, when I was looking at that particular comic book, I was about 11 years old when Green Lantern, Green Arrow number 85 came out. The title was Snowbirds Don't Fly. And we went to this pizza parlor. That was a pizza parlor and a magazine stand combo. My sister took me in there. We were going to have pizza. But I stumbled upon this particular comic book. And as I'm looking at it, I felt like I was watching a movie, not looking at a comic book. Everything was so alive, the lighting. And again, I was 11 years old. I wasn't thinking specifically about the lighting and the composition, but I was feeling it. I was in that book. And it was kind of scary because it was a very heavy subject about drugs. But I just was riveted by it. And back then, it cost 25 cents back then. But so did a slice of pizza, believe it or not, back then.
Yeah.
And my sister said, You want that instead of a slice of pizza? I said, yes, I gotta have this. I have to have it. Again, 11 years old, I did just something that riveted. So anyhow, as time goes on, I'm in high school and I'm collecting comic books and I'm collecting everything. I mean, I collected other people too, but Neil's work was really what I really was engaged with and enamored by. So by the time I got to high school, I really wanted to see if I could start meeting some comic book artists, and I worked at a place called the New York Comic Art Gallery where they displayed original artwork. When Neil Adams walked in with that, I worked for the guy just to kind of watch to make sure kids didn't steal his comic books, but also I helped to cut mats and things that I learned a lot. It was part of my education to work there. Mark Rindner was the man that ran that. He's another one of my heroes because he opened this door. So anyhow, as I was walking around, I found he came in, and I asked him a couple of questions just to talk to Neil Adams, but he didn't have much to say because he was there to see the show. Then he left. But then Mark had a booth at the it was called the Creation Convention back in 1976, and and he said, Louis, you want to come with the convention? I need your help to, because it was just two of us working. I said, I get to go to a comic book convention for free, and you know you're going to get paid to go. So I went there, and of course, at the beginning, they let us run around, because we wouldn't have to stay at our stations during the convention. But when I ran around, I saw Neil Adams standing right in the middle of one of the ballrooms. And I had just purchased, because he would be able to buy a few things, even though the con didn't start yet. I had the Neil Adams Treasury. I cherished that thing. Beautiful artwork. I just bought it. Didn't know I was going to see him. He's standing right there by himself. So I went up to him, Mr. Adams, can you autograph my Treasury? He didn't say a word, just feeling for a pencil. I said, I have a pencil. I ran 3 ballrooms away. I said, oh God, please let him be there. Please let him be there when I get back there. Sure enough, he was there. He signed it for me. I still have that same issue.
Great.
And the thing is that the following year, I was 17 years old. And I used to play around with my friends and say, one day Neil Adams is going to ink my pencils the way they do it in comic books and things like that. But I was just saying it, not really believing it, but it was like a hope in my heart. And then Mark Rindler, the one that was running the Comic Art Gallery, his friend was Howard Chaykin, the first artist to do the Star Wars comic books back in the day.
Right.
And he needed an assistant. So Mark said, Louis, I don't want to lose you, man, but this is an opportunity you might be able to, make something of. My friend Howard Chaykin's the comic book artist. He needs an assistant. Would you be interested? I said, yeah, to get involved with comic books. And he hadn't done Star Wars yet, but he was doing other things that were really interesting. So I went there, and he loved my stuff. Then he told me, you know what, Louis? Maybe about a month into doing it, he said, the first Friday of every month, all the comic book artists that are in New York City, they get together for what's called First Friday Party. Would you like to come? So, yeah, I'd love to. I guess I'm going to see all these other comic book artists. This one's at Neil Adams' house. And I got scared. He said, I want you to bring your sketchbooks because I want Neil to see your work. And I had already heard that if Neil doesn't like your work, he lets you know without question. So I was scared. I said, if Neil doesn't like my work, I don't think I can survive that. Got to the apartment. Of course, Howard wasn't there yet, so I'm sitting there by myself, scared, seeing all these great comic book artists walk by back in the day. Didn't see Neil yet. But after a while, he comes out, and he sits in front of me, just looking at me. And I'm looking at the TV because I said, oh, my gosh, it's Neil Adams. What am I going to do? And he goes, he turns the TV off, sits back, and starts looking at me again. And then I don't know what to do. Right then, Howard came in like an angel. He orders his drink, and he comes up. Neil, have you seen this kid's work yet? So he grabs my sketchbooks and kneels down in front of Neil, and then starts to turn the pages. And Neil's looking at everything, and he's looking up at me. Then he took over. He looked at my sketchbooks 3 times, backwards and forwards. And then he said the magic words. He says, I've been sitting on a series of scripts that I couldn't find anybody who I thought could do it. But I think you can do it. Would you like to come up to continuity and get you started on the project? I said, okay, I have to leave now because I was overwhelmed. So I took my sketchbooks, I finished my lasagna. His daughter, Chris, made the best lasagna. I had to finish that. Then I left. But I was screaming at 48th Street and Madison Avenue, Neil Adams just hired me. I can't believe it. Neil Adams just hired me. That began pretty much a lifelong friendship after that. I mean, we were friends till he passed away a couple of years ago. But that was a moment that he hired me from my school. And I did something that was called Tippy Toe Jones, where it was the reason why he liked my work is because I could draw both in a cartoony way and realistically because I loved Norman Rockwell. I still do. He's my favorite artist of all time. But that's when, that's what brought me to the place where I could do the cartoons and the realistic. And Neil felt that I did it well enough that I could do the book. And
this sort of discovering of mentors thing is so interesting because I figured out kind of in college, I started writing plays and they got produced and I loved it. And I was like, I think that's what I want to do. And all the advice I got, my dad was a theater reviewer, so he knew people and I had informational interviews and everyone said the same thing, which is like, if you want to work theater, work in a theater. It doesn't matter what you, tearing tickets, whatever. And I got a job washing dishes at Second City. But the thing was, this late 80s, you know, all the alumni are around, right? And so you're like, suddenly I'm at the front bar and I'm talking to Harold Ramis, who directed so many of the great comedies, Stripes, yeah, the best.
Rest in peace.
And rest in peace, Groundhog Day. Ugh. And Harold's like, well, let me look at your stuff, and was so encouraging and continued to be, like, it became a friend. And it was those little nudges. And I didn't know, like, I didn't know what a producer was, which is what I became. And I didn't become a playwright, but I wrote a book. And it's like, I discovered these things along the way, but I would not have discovered, you don't discover alone, right? Exactly. None of us are alone in this universe.
Exactly.
And you say something really interesting in chapter 1 of this book. You say, quote, stories often contain lessons, and sometimes we don't see those lessons until we tell our stories. What I love about that is it's not passive. You got to start telling your story in whatever way that means to you, and things will happen. Maybe not the exact thing you thought it would be, but if you try, so many people come in here and they're like, I don't, you know, someone's going to steal my idea. Someone's going to do it. I'm like, you got to throw it out in the universe, man.
You got
to. There's no choice.
Humanity,
stay quiet. Nothing.
Humanity was cultivated with stories.
Yep.
It's not just our DNA, our ancient DNA. It is the very thing that, back before they were even writing, people were telling stories. That's how everything was passed on from generation to generation. So storytelling is ultimately the communication and storytelling. That's everything. So that's why I love what we get to do. You know, I consider what we do the same thing. We're creating, we're telling stories. And that's
absolutely. You also talk about confidence, and I think this is important because my friend Sunil Gupta has a great book called Backable. So he was searching for the things that make people back them, and what he recognized that when people they say the word confidence, but often they mean charisma, and he's like, they're two different things.
Yes, that's phenomenal.
And he's like, if you look at Mr. Rogers, you know, in front of Congress, he's not this like amazing orator, but like he had confidence. Everyone knew everything he was going to say. Steve Jobs, not the best speaker, but everyone knew this guy knew what he was sort of saying. Yes. And you talk about this idea of commitment creates confidence. So you don't have to be, you know, Caesar. You got to believe in the thing that you're saying.
Absolutely. And that it was a key moment because I remember, as I say in the book, that whenever I'm on a panel, I'm always the last panelist. I never ask for it.
Yeah.
It happens. And I really believe it's divinely ordered because at the beginning, I was just another panelist because when everybody said, you should feel confident, you should be confident. And I would say the same thing because that's what I was always told. But everybody's eyes would glaze over at that moment.
Yeah.
So I said, I got to come up with a better answer than that. Because I know, right now I'm confident. But back then, you couldn't get me to do this. No way. But I said, there's got to be a better answer to this. So I went back and looked at my life and ultimately discovered, you know what? It wasn't that I was chasing confidence. I just wanted to get better at what I was doing. And by getting better, by practicing, by being committed to what I was trying to get better at, the confidence came as a byproduct. So that's why I say confidence is the byproduct of commitment. You stay committed. You just keep getting better. I remember going to the Art Students League and drawing the models and crumbling it up and throwing away. Because I said, I got to get this right. I said, if I stop throwing them away, maybe I'm making progress without realizing it. So I went back and started to keep the drawings. I started looking and saying, no, this is a really good drawing. Maybe it doesn't look exactly like the model, but I am learning. I am growing. So that by itself was a little bit of a trigger to let me know that progress was being made. I forgot about having confidence about it because I didn't want to show anybody my drawings. I didn't have confidence. After a while, I started to enter them into shows at the Art Students League. And I got an award and everything. And said, I'm not doing too bad. But again, it wasn't that I was chasing the confidence. I was committed to chasing the outcome of what I wanted to get better at. And that's what did it for me. So I told that to the first time I got on the panel. I was the last panelist, and I was able to tell that story. And it was the last question, and the girl asked, and when I told her my answer, she collapsed in tears. And at first, I said, "Oh my God, what did I do? Did I say something wrong?" And she got up, she ran into my arms and hugged me and said, "Everybody keeps telling me I have to be confident, but you just said it." Because I told her, said, confidence is not a light switch. You can't just be confident. How do you do that? But you can
No.
cultivate, you can grow the confidence by just doing what you know to do. Keep practicing, be diligent, be committed. And then the confidence will be the byproduct without you even trying. People have been using it and telling me. At first, people, come on, they can't be that simple. Life's not as difficult as we make it out to be, you know? There's
Mm,
some little nuggets in there. We just use them, we'll be okay, you know?
yeah. Another thing that sort of builds from there that you talk about that I also experienced, but a little bit later in life, I think, than maybe when you figured it out. In various moments of struggle for myself, I realized through therapy mostly that my body was talking to me and I didn't know how to listen. And
Yes.
the minute I had this terrific therapist and we sort of worked on this stuff, like so much discovery came out of that process. But it wasn't the brain, it was everything else. And you say, quote, "Life will scream at you to wake up," and
Yes.
that really means like listen to that stuff. It like, yeah, it's hard, it sucks, it's like, the tears, the whatever, the pains, all that, but also it's a gift that is being given to you.
Absolutely. And to tell you the truth, it doesn't start screaming. It's our
No.
lives, our lives love us. We just have to love it back. So of course, at first it's going to be gentle. So yeah, maybe I need to lose weight or whatever the case may be. But no. You really need to pay attention to this. So it starts off as almost a whisper, but a gentle nudge. Then after a while, because if we really need it, our lives are going to love us to the point where it's, will you stop and pay attention? You got to
Hmm.
stop eating that crap. Look, I had type 2 diabetes for my whole life, and I kept eating ice cream and Snicker bars. My son told me, Dad, you're not doing well, man. I said, and I was quite a bit overweight. And he told me a diet. So I'm like, I'm not going to be doing any diets. It's not just a diet. It's the way people have been eating forever. So he said, just try it one time. I said, I'm not going to try any fads. But when I became a member of the board of trustees at the Norman Rockwell Museum, I got excited.
Yeah.
And I was right there in town. The whole town looks like a Norman Rockwell painting. And they had a general store downstairs. And I saw all the candy I had when I was a kid in that general store. I couldn't eat that. But in the back, there was a barrel with like homemade licorice. I said, it was homemade. How bad could it be? Well, they use sugar when they make that.
Mm.
And I ate some and I shot my blood sugar up. And so my son, when I told him when I got back, I said, Mike, you're not going to do what I did. I ate that licorice and shot my blood sugar up. And he says, Dad, if you're going to do something stupid like that, then just try this diet. So you're not calling me stupid, are you? He said, no, but what you did was stupid. So
Yeah.
sometimes life will scream at you from your loved ones too, not just from you.
Sure.
The life is going to reach for you. It's going to keep on trying to get your attention because life wants to live. And it wants to live through you because it's your life. You know? I can say more
Hmm.
about that. You got me on fire, Kelly. So
Good. Good.
come on.
Well, let's keep going because when I started working I didn't know Second City created through improvisation. I came to the shows. It was funny. It was daring. Oddly enough, I knew a lot about improvisation because I'm a huge jazz fan. I followed the Grateful Dead for a long while. I did my thesis on Jack Kerouac and spontaneous beat prosody, which
No.
is improv writing. Yeah. So I was all about the improv, just didn't know that this thing existed. And I learned about it. And the thing that over and over and over that you get ingrained in you in the teaching here is you got to make mistakes work for you. That all obstacles are gifts. That it is failure is certain, and your ability to like pivot on the failure turns into something sort of beautiful on stage. And you talk about this in the book where you say, quote, "Mistakes are not a dead end. We can look through what are called mistakes with a different mindset." And to me,
Absolutely.
that's an improv mindset.
Nice. Well, the whole thing is that, you know what? Another big premise of the book is that everybody's a work in progress for your entire life. So
Yep.
everything is practice. It doesn't matter. So that's why even Miles Davis, you talk about
Yeah.
but his quote in there, don't fear mistakes. There aren't any. If he heard a mistake, he would find a way to work it into the music. And again, it's words like failure. I have what's in the book called alarm words, and there are words that scare people. That if they hear the word, it automatically puts tension and anxiety into them. So I said, instead of using those words, I mean, look, I'm not trying to say they don't exist. I'm just saying instead of using a word like failure, why not? Because you only fail when you stop. There is failure, but it's only when you quit. That's the
Yeah.
failure. But if you keep going, that means you're practicing. So it's not failure, it's practice. You're learning what not to do while you're growing the ability to learn what to do. And because we're a work in progress from the minute we are born to the last day of our life, we're a work in progress. So you never land. That means you're always in development. You're always being cultivated. To me, that when I really discovered that, it was like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders. So you mean if I don't get it right now, yeah, I'm never going to get it right. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be wrong. It just means I'm going to keep on growing and learning. So that to me, that's again being a child. Children are always constantly learning. I mean, Elmo from Sesame Street, the big E also means exploration. We're supposed to be exploring and constantly looking at life and trying to see what's the next thing. What can I learn now? Not trying to think we figured it out. We've landed. We've stopped. I don't believe in words like expert and master. I'm not disrespecting anyone. I'm just saying that if you've mastered something, that means you've learned everything you could possibly learn about that. That's how I see it. So I don't want to even be a master. I don't even want to be an expert. I want to be an enthusiast, somebody who's so immersed in the subject matter, like either it's music or comic books or children, anything, just to be able so immersed in it that I'm constantly getting deeper, growing deeper. Because there's no way to stop learning until you're dead. And then on that side, who knows what's up, you know?
So we're recording this podcast on September 12th, 2025, and it's been a rough period. It's there's a lot of noise, a lot of pain,
Yes.
tragedy. And one of the things Ed Wells and I were in the office before you and I jumped on, and we were talking about the fact that we're very aware of the things that are going on. We want to do good in the universe. We want to participate, all those things. And I said, I was reminded of a monk I had in the podcast, Dandapani, who said it over and over again, you are where you put your attention. And I said, I think about that a lot these days because I need to be okay. And so I choose to put my attention in a lot of the beautiful things in life. Our conversation is beautiful. My friends at work, I had a great night last night. And it is not saying the suffering, all the other things don't exist, because they do. And that is a matter of fact. But the other also does. And this is a very hard thing for people to sort of rectify, is that, you're never going to, like, nothing is, the hedonic treadmill is not a thing. If you were happy all the time, you wouldn't know how to be happy. But it is a dance, and you talk about dancing with the planet and dancing with the universe, and I see this as well in really hard times like this. It is calling us to dance a bit.
You know what? My sister, she's back there. So yes, she is. That's her, Juanita. She passed away in 2007, and I couldn't think of anything that was, there's always a silver lining. I couldn't find a silver lining.
No.
I just wanted to just run in the street, But at the same time, later on, when it calmed down, I was able to think about all the wonderful, funny things she used to do. She believed in me. And I said, you know what? The tragedies in life, just reminders, when it's good, embrace it, enjoy it, savor life. Make sure that when it does go bad, and it will, maybe not that extreme, but it could also. Just remember, you're going to go through that, and you're going to come out of it. That I believe in the Phoenix thing, the whole thing about you go through the fire and you come out, you will have learned something, but also you're going to appreciate the times that you didn't have to go through all that stuff. Because most of the time, I guess it's very basic. Every now and then something spectacular happens, and every now and then something tragic happens. We always have to be able to go back and reflect. So you know what? Life actually is a blessing. It's a gift. And just because things go wrong doesn't mean that you don't go back and remember, you know what? Overall, I'm enjoying this life. There's love in my life. There's creativity in my life. And that's what I want to really focus on. So when things go wrong, it's all right. I'm going through this right now. It's making me appreciate the times that I'm not going through this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
well, this is, I mean, we lost our daughter to cancer 6 years ago. She had just turned 17. and it's a process. It's not linear. Grief, trauma, all that. But just today, Mark, who helps run the food and beverage stuff at Second City, who is kind of a recent friend, he's been here a couple of years. He was talking about his previous work, which was at Lurie's Children's Hospital, where Nora was, and he didn't know my situation. And I told him about my situation. I was telling him about Nora, and I tell Nora stories all the time because she was the best. She was hilarious. And Mark, just before I was sort of walking in, he hugged me and said, "I'm so glad you shared that story with me." And so there are gifts to be found in the worst situations. And you don't know until you go through these things. I'm sure this happened with you, which is like everyone has that story. Might not
Yeah.
be a child, but it's a sister, it's a dad, it's a dog, it's a cat, it's a friend, it's a mentor. It's a career, it's a marriage. I mean, the loss is inevitable. So, learning to incorporate, and it is a gift. And it's, I don't know that I know, I know that I got to be at the place I am because of my life's work and recognizing this life thing is an art.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You must have read
Oh,
Qreative Evolution.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. I'm going to ask you for a yes and story in a moment. Before
Yes,
I do that, I want you to talk about the evolution of Julia the Muppet.
my baby.
Yeah.
So, a really dear friend of mine, Rachel London Carter. Back then, her name was just Rachel London because she was an intern at Sesame, and she
Wow.
heard me do a talk for the luncheon for the interns. And she came to my office later on and said, I really love what you were saying, and she took a real interest in the work I did there at work. But then she told me what she did. She did a lot of volunteer work for children on the autism spectrum, and she was working in schools and things like that. I think she started when she was like 15 years old, but she really has a heart for that. And one day she said, I think you'd be good for them. I said, me? No, I don't want to disrupt any progress they've made. I'm not trained for that. And she said, we just have to love them. I said, oh, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to the school. It was a school on Staten Island, and I got to work with two particular kids, not at the same time, but just one after the other. And I remember I just fell in love with him. It was easy to, the one boy, I felt, he was just amazing. His motor skills were really challenged. He couldn't quite do much, but I was able to get him to do it because whenever I showed up in the room, he started flailing around because he was so happy. And he really tried hard. Like I wanted him to spell his name with the letters, just to move the letters in order of his name. So of course he put the M there, was upside down, was a W, but I said, no, that's good. That's the first letter. So now what's the next one? He got up to the H, I think. And they said he never got that far, but just because he's working with me, did the same thing with another little girl. I was helping her with a puzzle. And if I held the puzzle piece too long, she would snatch it out of my hand and put it down for me, thinking that I didn't know where it went. But the whole thing is that because Rachel saw it in me to be so immersive with these kids. I worked with them at the schools. Then I started meeting their parents and working with them at their homes. I went on outings. It was immersive. It was more than any of the training that I got at Sesame Workshop once I did get the assignment to design Julia. Now, see, Sesame didn't know that I was volunteering for a school with kids on the spectrum. I didn't know Sesame was working on the Autism Initiative, and they had been doing so for 10 years. Finally, Dr. Jeanette Betancourt, the person in charge of that initiative, came to me and said, Louis, we've been working on this initiative for a while, and we need a character, and we need you to design a little girl. And her name wasn't Julia at the time, but eventually became Julia. But so I said, now I know. See, I'm telling you, like I'm the last person on panels, and I was volunteering at the school, not knowing about Sesame. There's something divinely going on here, because I wouldn't have touched this project if it wasn't for the experience that I got through Rachel believing in me enough to connect with the kids. So I went ahead and I started doing sketches of the character based on what I knew. But then they started giving me more information. It took about a full year to really get the whole thing down. But Julia was designed right away because I just thought about not what the little girl made me, not what she looked like, but how she made me feel. And again, storytelling was all about. So character design is still storytelling. So I gave her like a diamond-shaped nose to indicate she's a diamond in the rough. I gave her eye angled a little bit differently than most of the Muppets. And even the people at Sesame, at Jim Henson Company, was saying, well, we've never done anything like this before. I said, because we never designed an autism Muppet before. So they didn't argue with me after that. So all the different things that I wanted to do to give her as much life as I could. Now, again, we have what's called the RAC Muppets now, the race, ethnicity, and culture Muppets. They look more human. Even though Julia is a humanoid, she still has a fanciful color. She has orange hair and she has yellow skin like Bert. But I wanted her to make her look more like a real little girl, because whenever the cameras turned on, she wasn't going to wave and say hello. She was going to be either drawing or playing with her doll or using her tablet. So she was going to be engaged with something else. I said, I need something to connect her to the audience right away. I said, if I give her human texture hair, that's going to make her look more like a real little girl. And I felt that should work. But the executive producer at the time said, no, we want her to be a regular Muppet. We want her to fit in just like she's a regular Muppet. I said, she's going to fit in, but she's not a regular Muppet. And this is an opportunity, but she was adamant about it. But Dr. Jeanette Betancourt, she was in charge of the initiative. She said, let's just try it Lewis's way. And she went ahead and we did it that way, and it worked. It worked perfectly. And, the whole autism community, whenever I see anyone and I find out that their child is on the spectrum or anything, I have to say a word about that. When they find out that I designed Julia, oh my gosh, you know how much Julia means to us. We didn't have any real representation until Julia and This Is America. They go on and on and on. And then some people find out who I am. I've gotten letters written to me at Sesame Workshop thanking me for Julia. I said, look, Julie, I gave her look. But it's really, we are symbiotic when we work at Sesame Workshop. First of all, they took 10 years to figure out how to just begin doing the work. All the research was a 10-year process to figure out how to do it. It's very sensitive, and they wanted to get it as right as they possibly could. There's no such thing as perfection. Everything's a work in progress. But to at least get a nice foundation built so that now we know how to begin. I love that. So, and then I started doing the process, started to go into all these symposiums and luncheons and all the kind of stuff. And I had more experience than most of the people there because of Rachel getting me involved with the kids on, it was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. Probably my favorite of all the processes that I went through to design one of the Muppets for Sesame Street.
As you're talking about this, it's dawning on me that when we talk about representation, that is also discovery. And I was having this conversation the other day with, I forget what the context was, but I flashed on the fact that we had a show where two able-bodied actors played characters in wheelchairs. And we had people who were very upset about that. And the people who were very upset were not people who were in wheelchairs. They were offended on behalf of other people. My late brother-in-law was in a wheelchair. He loved the scene because he finally saw someone who looked like him on the stage. He recognized they were actors, that they played a variety of different roles. And I had the advantage because I had him, to be able, and I could talk to these people and go, you don't, Morgan Housel is a terrific writer, and he has a phrase in a book, and I keep coming back to it because I think it's amazing, which is everyone's behavior makes sense if you have enough information.
Wow. That is a nugget.
Isn't that good? And it's like, if that doesn't make you humble in your opinion, you're not listening.
Exactly. That's wonderful.
So discover, yeah, it's great. Okay, we always end the podcast with a yes and story. I would love to hear yours.
Okay. So explain the yes and, so in case people don't quite understand what that means.
So in improvisation, what we know is if you're making something out of nothing, you get nowhere by saying no. No does nothing. You actually don't get that far by saying yes, because what's the other person supposed to do? So you say yes and. You explore and heighten. You build off what the other person gave you, then they build off what you gave them, and vice versa. We create these things in communities of people by yes-anding each other. And the only time if we want to shut it down, that's when the no comes up. And there's places for no, but what we're really talking about is like too many of us don't allow ourselves to yes-and ourselves in any given moment.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So my story is going back to the Norman Rockwell Museum. So I remember when I was in there, I submitted a piece of artwork, and they loved it, and they put it up in the show. I just wanted to be part of their collection because I use it in my presentation, and they flipped. It was a drawing of Kermit the Frog looking in the mirror and drawing Jim Henson, and that's based on the Norman Rockwell triple self-portrait that he did. So it was just something that they flipped over so big. I said, you know what? Maybe I can donate this to the museum and it'd be in their permanent collection. And I wrote a letter to to Chief Curator Stephanie Plunkett, and it felt like before I hit send, she already replied in all caps, yes, yes, we would love to have that in our collection. And I was, oh my gosh, my artwork's going to be in the collection, but I didn't know that they were going to put it up in the show, because at the time they had a show called From Woodstock to the Moon. Everything that happened in 1969, which included the Norman Rockwell Museum and Sesame Street, along with the moon landing and the Woodstock concert. So when I did my presentation, I showed that and they flipped over it. So I went back and I had to go back and see my artwork up in that museum because they didn't put it up right away. So after a while, I went back up to see my drawing on the walls of my favorite artist museum. And I was a mess. I was crying. And of course, whenever I went up there, they would stop all the tours and say, "Oh, we have a special guest here, Louis Henry Mitchell. You know, he's from Sesame Street. Would you give us a few words?" And we have his new artwork up on the wall. And I had to say, folks, you have to forgive me. This is a very emotional moment for me. Norman Rockwell is my favorite artist, and I did a tribute to Norman Rockwell and Jim Henson, and it's up in this museum. And I don't know what to do with myself, and I'm trying not to. And they're clapping for me and all this. But then there was a man on the side waiting for me after we finished. His name is Peter Williams. And he said, "Louis, can I take you to get a cup of coffee? I want to talk to you about something." He said, "Oh, sure." So we went to the commissary. And after he was saying nice things about my presentation, how he's proud of me about my artwork being up in the museum. So, we would like you to consider being a member of the Board of Trustees. And I wasn't expecting to hear that. I said, "Well, what does that entail?" And he started explaining to me. My first instinct was, no, I can't do this. There's no way in the world that I'm not qualified. Everything went to my head. But it was just the way he kept saying, "No, we see how much you love Norman Rockwell. We see you care about illustration. You care about art. You're a teacher. You do all these things. We think you'd be a very good candidate. Now, of course, you don't have to decide now, but please take it into consideration." And it wasn't long before I said, wait a minute. They saw it in me. Just because I don't see it doesn't mean other people are not going to see it. That's part of the cultivation. That's part of, growing and cultivating and loving life and living. When you live your life out on purpose, other people are either like-minded, will be attracted to you, or if they don't like that, they'll be repelled from you. No hard feelings. It's just that the people that you belong with will see you when you're living your life genuinely and living it. I'm not talking about being completely flamboyant and whatever. I'm just saying that just be honest, be genuine in living your life. They saw that, and it triggered them to invite me to be a member of the Board of Trustees. So I said yes. I did. Every instinct in me was no, no, no. But I said yes, and I've been on the board. 5 years now? And I've been engaged with some of the most. If I didn't say yes to that, the opportunities that I would have missed. One of my favorite ones is over at Tanglewood, where with Leonard Bernstein, one of my heroes. He did his first concert, his first concert was in Carnegie Hall, but his last concert was in Tanglewood, and he went to school there and everything like that. So I got to do a performance drawing in Tanglewood on behalf of the Norman Rockwell Museum, and I said I remember thinking that day, I would not have been if I'd said no to this opportunity. And it was only because I just didn't want to be there if I wasn't qualified. But who's to say I'm not qualified? You have the only way to know if you're qualified. Go ahead and try it. Just go ahead and do it. You will know by the action whether or not it's for you. And in the process, you'll learn what is for you while you're learning what's not for you. But that was for me.
That's right. The book is called Qreative Evolution: How to Question Everything to Find Your Creative Fulfillment. Louis Henry Mitchell. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I sure appreciate you. It was fun.